The explosion that remade the galaxy lasted for 3 seconds and changed everything that had ever existed or ever would exist. Kyungmin felt a wave of energy pass through his ship and waited to die, but instead found himself floating in space that looked like it had been painted with colors that had no names. The galactic core was still there, but it was different now, and the darkness between the stars was full of light that moved like living things. When the human fleet regrouped, they discovered that they were not alone in the transformed galaxy. The Devourers were still there, but they were no longer the hungry entities that had consumed civilization after civilization. The explosion had changed them into something new, and they were floating through space like confused children who had forgotten what they had been trying to do. Some of them even seemed to be trying to communicate, but their messages were questions instead of threats. Il Sung was the first human to make contact with one of the transformed entities, and what he learned changed everything humanity thought. They knew about their enemies. The Devourers had not chosen to become consumers of civilizations, but had been driven by hunger that was older than the universe itself. The galactic reset had not destroyed them, but had given them the ability to feed on creation and growth instead of destruction and death. The surviving council members were few and scattered, but they were also changed by the explosion in ways that none of them understood. Vexithara found that her psychic abilities now worked differently, and instead of being able to read and control other minds, she could sense emotional connections and feel the love that bound families and communities together. For the first time in her long life, she understood what humans meant when they talked about feelings that were stronger than logic. Yujin was documenting the changes that were spreading through the galaxy, and what she found was a transformation that reached down to the atomic level. Planets that had been dead for millions of years were showing signs of new life, and stars that had been dying were burning with renewed energy. The galaxy was healing itself, but it was also becoming something that had never existed before. The most dramatic change was in how different species were able to think and communicate with each other. The rigid hierarchies that had defined galactic civilization for millions of years were dissolving as beings learned to value individual choice and emotional connection over collective efficiency and logical optimization. Former council members found themselves working alongside beings they had once considered inferior and discovering that they had been wrong about almost everything that mattered. Hyo-jin was studying the first generation of children born after the galactic reset, and what she discovered was remarkable. Young beings from every surviving species were developing thinking patterns that resembled human consciousness more than their own ancestral traditions. They were learning to value friendship over duty and creativity over conformity, and they were asking questions that their elders had never thought to ask. The transformation was not without conflict because many of the surviving council members resented having to learn from beings they had spent years dismissing as primitives. Some Vorthak groups tried to rebuild their old empire using traditional methods, but found that their technology no longer worked the way it had before the reset. Other species attempted to return to collective consciousness, but discovered that individual thought was now necessary for survival in the changed galaxy. Sung Ho was serving as an ambassador to a mixed colony of humans and former council species, when he witnessed something that would have been impossible in the old galaxy. A group of young Vorthak were working with human children to solve problems that required both logical analysis and creative intuition. The alien children were learning to think with human patterns, while the human children were learning to appreciate the alien perspective, and together, they were discovering solutions that neither species could have found alone. The new galaxy was not without dangers, because the transformation had awakened things that had been sleeping in the darkness between stars for longer than anyone could. Remember, ancient entities that had been waiting for the galaxy to evolve beyond the rigid patterns of the old council were emerging from hiding places that existed outside normal space and time. Some of these beings were helpful, but others were curious about the new forms of consciousness in ways that could be dangerous. Mira was commanding a joint exploration mission when they encountered one of these ancient entities and learned that the galaxy had been shaped by forces that the council had never suspected existed. The being called itself a gardener and explained that it had been waiting for millions of years for civilizations to develop beyond the consumption and competition that had characterized galactic development since the beginning of recorded history. The Gardner revealed that the Devourers had been a test that every galaxy faced, and that most civilizations failed because they were too advanced to make the sacrifices necessary to break the cycle of hunger and consumption. Humanity had succeeded, not because they were primitive, but because they had retained the ability to choose hope over logic and love over survival. This made them the first species in galactic history to pass the test and earn the right to guide galactic development into its next phase. But earning the right to lead was very different from actually knowing how to lead, and humanity found themselves responsible for beings and civilizations that they barely understood. The former council species had knowledge and experience that humans needed, but they also had habits of thought that were incompatible with the new galactic reality. Teaching them to think like humans while learning from their expertise required patience and wisdom that no human had ever needed to develop before. The solution came from the children who were growing up in the transformed galaxy, because they were learning to think in ways that combined the best aspects of every species. Human creativity and alien logic merged into new forms of consciousness that could solve problems that had been impossible for either species alone. These hybrid thinkers became the bridge between the old galaxy and the new one. The rebuilt council that eventually emerged was unlike anything that had existed before, because it was based on cooperation rather than dominance, and on emotional connection rather than logical hierarchy. Representatives from every species worked together as equals, and decisions were made by consensus rather than by the commands of superior beings. It was messy and inefficient, and completely different from the ordered civilization that had existed before, but it was also more creative and more resilient than anything the galaxy had ever seen. Years passed, and the new galactic civilization grew stronger as species that had once been enemies learned to work together as partners. Trade networks were rebuilt around the exchange of ideas rather than resources, and exploration missions were launched not to claim territory, but to discover new forms of beauty and wonder. The galaxy became a place where differences were celebrated, rather than feared, and where every species could contribute something unique to the common good. The final test came when signals were detected from another galaxy, where the same cycle of consumption and destruction was beginning to repeat itself. The reformed Devourers, who now called themselves Nurturers, asked if they could travel to this distant galaxy and offer the same choice that humanity had made. They wanted to give other civilizations the opportunity to break free from the patterns of hunger and competition that had trapped so many species for so long. Mira, who was now the senior representative of the human government, gave permission for the mission, but also insisted that human volunteers accompany the Nurturers to ensure that the offer was made with the same combination of love and sacrifice that had saved their own galaxy. The ships that departed carried beings from every surviving species, and they traveled not as conquerors, but as teachers, who had learned that the greatest strength came from the willingness to give everything for strangers who might not deserve salvation. The galaxy that humanity had once been dismissed from as Grade 7 primitives was now a place where consciousness itself was evolving beyond the limitations that had defined civilized development since the beginning of time. The species that had been mocked for thinking with their hearts instead of their heads had taught the universe that hearts were actually more powerful than anyone had ever imagined, and that the capacity to love was the most advanced technology that any civilization could develop. The stars that had once looked down on Earth with indifference now shone with the light of a billion worlds, where beings from every species were learning to think and feel and dream in ways that honored both logic and emotion. The galaxy had learned to speak with a human voice, but it had also learned to sing with harmonies that no single species could have created alone, and the music that emerged was more beautiful than anything that had ever existed in the long history of the universe. Captain Lee Hyun sat in the cold metal chair and watched the aliens argue about humans again. The Grand Assembly Hall was huge and made of crystal that sparkled like diamonds around the neutron star outside. 847 different species had seats in this place. Today, they all seemed angry at the same people. The humans. Lee Hyun had been coming to these meetings for 5 years now. Every time it was the same thing. Some alien would stand up and complain about what humans had done. Another alien would agree. Then they would all look at the small group of humans sitting in the corner and shake their heads or wave their tentacles or click their mandibles in disapproval. Dr. Park Sola sat next to him reading data on her tablet. She was the smartest person Lee Hyun had ever met. She could solve problems that made other species give up. Right now, she was reading the latest charges against humanity. Her face showed no emotion, but Lee Hyun could see her jaw getting tight. Commander. Kim Dae stood behind them with his hand near his weapon. Not because he planned to use it, but because 40 years of military training had taught him to always be ready. The other species made him nervous. Not because they were stronger than humans, but because they were so predictable. Predictable. Creatures often did stupid things when they got scared. On the great stage in front of them, Counselor Vexithara was speaking. She was 7 feet tall with green scales and yellow eyes that never blinked. Her species had been running the Galactic Council for 300 years. They were good at making rules and terrible at understanding why those rules often made no sense. The charges against the human species are serious, Vexithara said in her cold voice. They have disrupted trade between the Zephyrian Empire and the Canthari Republic. They have interfered with the natural order on 17 different worlds. They have introduced dangerous ideas about freedom and individual rights. They have caused economic chaos throughout 3 sectors. Lee Hyun almost laughed. The Zephyrians and Cantharis had been fighting over trade routes for 200 years. Humans had simply offered both sides a better deal, a deal where everyone made more money and no one had to fight. Apparently, this was considered disruptive. The 17 worlds Vexithara mentioned had been slave colonies. Humans had not freed the slaves. They had simply offered the enslaved species better technology and education. The slaves had freed themselves. But somehow this was also humanity's fault. Ambassador Quilnox stood up from his section. He was one of the few aliens who ever spoke for humans. His insect-like species valued logic over politics. This made them strange in the Galactic Council. Counselor Vexithara, Quilnox said, the humans offered fair trade agreements to both the Zephyrians and Cantharis. Both species benefited. How? Is mutual benefit a crime? Because it upset the balance, Vexithara replied. The Galactic Council maintains peace through careful control of trade and resources. When humans ignore our guidelines, they create chaos. Dr. Park Sola looked up from her tablet. What you call balance, we call stagnation, she said quietly. But her voice carried in the huge hall. Your guidelines have kept most species at the same technology level for 500 years. You call this peace. We call it a prison. Angry sounds came from all over the hall. Clicks and hisses and strange musical notes that meant displeasure in dozens of different languages. Lee Hyun had heard these sounds many times before. Vexithara's yellow eyes focused on Dr. Park Sola. Humans are too aggressive, too unpredictable, too dangerous for civilized society. You think you know better than species who have been spacefaring for thousands of years. We do not think we know better, Lee Hyun said, standing up slowly. We simply refuse to pretend that slavery is natural, or that poverty is necessary, or that war is inevitable. If this makes us dangerous, then yes, we are dangerous. More angry sounds filled the hall. Lee Hyun had given up trying to understand why helping people was considered a threat. In the 5 years he had been coming here, he had watched the council make the same mistakes over and over. They would see a problem and create a rule to manage it instead of solving it. When the rule failed, they would create more rules. When those rules failed, they would blame whoever had tried to actually fix the problem. Usually that was humans. Vexithara raised one scaled hand, and the hall went quiet. The Galactic Council has reached a decision. Resolution 847 Alpha has been approved by a vote of 834 to 3. The human species will be stripped of all voting rights in this council. All human colonies outside the Sol system will be relocated. Humans will be confined to their home system until they can complete a civilization improvement program designed by this council. Lee Hyun felt something cold settle in his stomach. Not fear exactly, but something close to it. They were talking about putting all of humanity in a cage. Furthermore, Vexithara continued, human technology transfers to other species will be monitored and controlled by council peacekeepers. Humans will not be permitted to travel beyond the Sol system without council approval. This is for the safety and stability of galactic civilization. Dr. Park Sola stood up next to Lee Hyun. Her face was very calm, but her hands were shaking slightly. May I respond to these charges? she asked. You may speak, Vexthera said. Dr. Park Sola walked to the center of the human section. 844 alien representatives watched her. She was small compared to most of them, but she did not look afraid. Every charge you have made against humanity is either false or the natural result of introducing actual progress to a stagnant system, she said. You say we disrupted trade. We offered better trade terms. You say we interfered with the natural order. We offered education and technology to enslaved populations. You say we caused economic chaos. We introduced innovations that made old, inefficient systems obsolete. She paused and looked around the huge hall. You do not want peace. You want control. You do not want civilization. You want predictability. You are not angry because we are dangerous. You are angry because we prove that your way is not the only way. The hall erupted in angry sounds again. Some aliens stood up and pointed at Dr. Park Sola. Others made threatening gestures. Vexthera had to call for order 3 times before. The noise died down. Lee Hyun walked over to stand next to Dr. Park Sola. Commander Kim Dae moved closer too. The 3 humans stood together in the center of the hall while hundreds of aliens glared at them. Lee Hyun reached up and removed his translator device. He spoke to his team in Korean. We are leaving. Get our people together. We are done here. Then, he put the translator back on and spoke in perfect galactic standard. His voice was calm and clear. We came here in good faith 2 centuries ago. We offered partnership, knowledge, and friendship. We helped build your communication networks. We shared our medical advances. We improved your energy systems. We fed your people with our agricultural technology. We asked for nothing in return except to be treated as equals. The hall was completely silent now. You have chosen to see these gifts as threats. You have decided that helping people is a crime. You have voted to put humanity in a cage because we refuse to pretend that suffering is natural and progress is dangerous. Lee Hyun looked directly at Vexthera. Very well. Humanity formally withdraws from the Galactic Council effective immediately. We will remove our people from all Council territories. We will take our technology with us. We will leave you to the peace and stability you claim to want so much. He turned to walk away, then stopped. But understand this. Every system you depend on has human improvements. Every advance you have made in the last 2 centuries builds on human innovation. Every solution to every major problem your civilization has faced came from human minds. When we leave, we take all of that with us. Dr. Park Sola dropped her tablet on the floor. It contained detailed records of every human contribution to galactic civilization over 200 years. It also contained projections of what would happen when those contributions were removed. The 3 humans walked toward the exit. Commander Kim Dae spoke quietly into his communicator, calling for immediate evacuation of all human personnel from the station. Behind them, the hall was still silent. Lee Hyun did not look back. He had spent 5 years trying to make this partnership work. Now it was over. As they reached the door, Ambassador Quilnox called out, Captain Lee Hyun, please reconsider. Not all species agree with this decision. Lee Hyun stopped and turned around one last time. Ambassador Quilnox, your species and 2 others voted against this resolution. You are welcome to visit Earth any time. The rest of them have made their choice. Now they can live with it. The door closed behind the humans with a soft hiss. In the hall, 844 alien representatives sat in stunned silence. None of them truly understood what had just happened. They would learn soon enough. Admiral Cho Hana stood on the bridge of the UES Horizon and watched the biggest moving job in galactic history begin. 3 months had passed since Captain Lee Hyun walked out of the Galactic Council. Now, it was time to bring humanity home. The bridge displays showed thousands of ships spread across hundreds of star systems. Every ship had the same mission: pack up everything humans had built over 200 years and bring it back to Earth. Leave nothing behind that could help the aliens who had just kicked humanity out of galactic civilization. Admiral, the extraction teams report they are ready. To begin, said Captain Kang Junho from his position at the communications station. He commanded the transport fleets that would carry humanity's technology and people back to Sol system. Begin the operation, Admiral Cho Hana said. Dr. Yun Tae walked onto the bridge carrying a thick data pad. She was in charge of making sure every human got safely home. She was also responsible for cataloging everything they were taking with them. The numbers are staggering, Dr. Yun Tae said, showing the Admiral her data. We have 12 million humans living outside Sol system, 4,000 space stations, 800 orbital factories, 300 agricultural worlds, and that does not count the technology we have integrated into alien infrastructure. Admiral Cho Hana nodded. She had seen the reports. Humans had been busy during their time in the galaxy, maybe too busy. They had built things and fixed things and improved things without really thinking about what would happen if they ever had to leave. Now they were finding out. Engineer Bai Miso contacted them from the Centauri station. Her job was to remove human technology from alien systems without breaking everything. It was harder than it sounded. Admiral, we have a problem at the Vegan trade hub, Bai Miso reported. The entire station power grid is based on human fusion technology. If we remove our reactors, the station goes dark. Leave instructions for maintaining the reactors, Admiral Cho Hana replied. I tried that. The Vegans cannot understand the technical specifications. Their mathematics is not advanced. Enough, Admiral Cho Hana sighed. This was happening everywhere. Humans had not meant to make other species dependent on human technology. It had just worked out that way. Human solutions were usually simpler and more efficient than what the aliens had been using. Over time, alien systems had been rebuilt around human improvements. Now those improvements were leaving. Captain Kang Junho reported from the transport fleets. Admiral, the Kepler colony evacuation is complete. 200,000 humans and their equipment are aboard the transport ships. But the aliens are asking us to stay. They say their crops will fail without human agricultural technology. Tell them we will leave complete technical manuals, Admiral Cho Hana said. We already did. They say the manuals are too complex for them to understand. This was the problem everywhere. Humans had not just given aliens their technology, they had given them advanced technology. Technology that required human-level scientific understanding to maintain and operate. Most alien species were smart, but they were specialized. The Vegans were excellent at art and philosophy, but terrible at engineering. The Centaurians were master traders, but weak scientists. The Polarians could navigate space better than anyone, but could not fix a broken computer. Humans were different. They were generalists. A human engineer could also be a poet. A human scientist could also be a warrior. A human farmer could also be an inventor. This flexibility had made humans valuable partners in the galaxy. It had also made the galaxy dependent on them in ways no one had realized. Dr. Yun Tae showed Admiral Cho Hana the latest reports from the extraction teams. The quantum communication network is failing in the outer sectors. Without human technicians to maintain the quantum entanglement nodes, the signals are becoming corrupted. How long before complete communication breakdown? Admiral Cho Hana asked. 6 months, maybe less. Admiral Cho Hana looked at the tactical display showing the galaxy-wide evacuation. Red indicators marked systems where human removal was causing immediate problems. Yellow indicators showed systems that would have problems soon. Green indicators showed systems that might survive without humans. There were very few green indicators. Engineer Bai Miso called again from another station. Admiral, the Andromedan shipyards are requesting that we leave our manufacturing equipment behind. They say they will pay any price for it. What did you tell them? I explained that the equipment is programmed with human-specific neural interfaces. Only humans can operate it. They asked if we would leave some humans behind to run it. And I told them that was not an option. Admiral Cho Hana understood the aliens' desperation. Human manufacturing equipment could build things that took alien factories 10 times longer to make. Human medical equipment could cure diseases that killed millions of aliens every year. Human computers could solve problems that alien supercomputers could not even understand. But the Galactic Council had made their decision. They wanted humans gone. Now, they were getting exactly what they had asked for. Captain Kang Junho reported. Again. Admiral, we are receiving messages from the Galactic Council. They want to negotiate. They say they may have been too hasty in their decision. Tell them to contact Earth directly. I am just a moving company now. The extraction continued for weeks. Human colonies that had existed for generations packed up everything they owned. Orbital habitats that had housed millions of people were carefully disassembled and loaded onto transport ships. Space stations that had served as trading hubs for entire sectors were shut down and towed away. The aliens watched in growing alarm as the backbone of galactic civilization was systematically removed. Systems that had run smoothly for decades suddenly required constant maintenance. Communication networks that had connected the galaxy became unreliable. Power grids that had provided clean energy to billions began to fail. Dr. Yoon Tae brought Admiral Cho Hana the final evacuation report. The last human colony ship has departed Rigel system. All civilian evacuations are complete. Only the technical teams remain to finish the infrastructure removal. How are the aliens handling it? Panic is spreading in some sectors. The Tau Ceti Confederation has declared a state of emergency. 3 systems have lost primary power. The Galactic Council is calling emergency sessions every day. Admiral Cho Hana was not surprised. Humans had been quietly fixing galactic civilization for 2 centuries. Every time something broke down, humans had provided a solution. Every time a new problem arose, humans had found an answer. The aliens had gotten used to this. Now they were discovering how much they had relied on human problem-solving. Engineer Bae Miso finished her work at the last major installation. Admiral, all human technology has been extracted from alien systems. We have left detailed maintenance manuals and technical specifications for everything we could not remove. Will the manuals be enough? For some species, yes. For others? Bae Miso paused. Let me put it this way. I left instructions for maintaining a fusion reactor written at a university level. Most alien species will need to spend 50 years just learning the basic concepts before they can understand the instructions. The final transport fleets departed for Earth loaded with the remnants of humanity's galactic civilization. Behind them, they left empty space stations, silent communication nodes, and increasingly desperate alien governments. Admiral Cho Hana received a personal message from Counselor Vexathara of the Galactic Council. The reptilian leader who had announced humanity's expulsion now wanted to talk about mutual cooperation and renegotiating the terms of human participation. Admiral Cho Hana deleted the message without reading it completely. Captain Kang Junho reported that the last human ship had cleared galactic space and was heading for Sol system. The evacuation was complete. 12 million humans were coming home along with everything they had built during 2 centuries among the stars. Dr. Yoon Tae ran the final calculations. Admiral, we have successfully extracted 97% of human technology and infrastructure from galactic space. The remaining 3% consists of systems too deeply integrated into alien infrastructure to remove without causing immediate catastrophic failure. What kind of failures? Complete power grid collapse, total communication breakdown, life support failure on hundreds of space stations. We are talking about billions of alien deaths. Admiral Cho Hana thought about this. Humanity had come to the galaxy in peace. They had shared their knowledge freely. They had helped solve problems and build a better civilization for everyone. The Galactic Council had thanked them by trying to put them in a cage. Now the cage was empty and the captors were discovering they had locked themselves out of their own civilization. Send a message to Earth Command, Admiral Cho Hana said. Tell them the evacuation is complete. All humans are coming home. And tell them the galaxy is about to discover what it looks like without us. The UES Horizon turned toward Earth and activated its jump drive. Behind them, the galaxy grew smaller and darker as human-maintained systems began to fail one by one. Admiral Cho Hana did not look back. The aliens had wanted them gone. Now they were gone. What happened next was not humanity's problem anymore. Director Han Jisoo watched the galaxy die from her monitoring station at the edge of Sol system. 6 months had passed since the last human evacuation ship had arrived at Earth. Now she spent her days documenting the collapse of galactic civilization. The monitoring station hung in space beyond Pluto like a silent lighthouse. Its sensors could detect signals from across the galaxy. For 200 years, those sensors had recorded the constant chatter of galactic civilization. Billions of voices, talking and trading and living across thousands of star systems. Now the chatter was becoming whispers. Soon it would be silence. Dr. Shin Wook joined Director Han Jisoo at the main observation deck. He carried reports that made grim reading. As the head of Galactic Systems Analysis, he tracked the progression of civilizational collapse across the galaxy. The communication breakdown is accelerating, Dr. Shin Wook said, placing his datapad on the table between them. Sector 7 went completely dark yesterday. Sector 12 is down to emergency channels only. The quantum entanglement network has failed in 40% of the galaxy. Director Han Jisoo nodded. She had been expecting this. Human technicians had maintained the quantum communication network for over a century. When they left, they had provided detailed instructions for maintenance, but those instructions required a level of scientific understanding that most alien species simply did not possess. Commander Onabi entered the observation deck carrying the daily defense report. Sol's system had become very popular lately. Every day brought new alien ships trying to enter human space. Most came with diplomatic messages. Some came with demands. A few came with threats. All were turned away. 3 more fleets approached the Sol system perimeter today, Commander Onabi reported. The first was a Centaurian trade delegation offering to buy human technology at any price. The second was a Vegan military fleet demanding we return to fix their infrastructure. The third was... She paused. The third was a refugee convoy, 200 ships carrying survivors from the Proxima system. What happened at Proxima? Director Han Jisoo asked. Dr. Shin Wook pulled up the Proxima data on his pad. Complete industrial collapse. The Proximans built their entire economy around human-designed manufacturing systems. When our technicians left, they tried to keep the systems running themselves. They failed. Mass production stopped. Supply chains broke down. Within 3 months, they had widespread shortages of food, medicine, and basic goods. How many refugees? Approximately 8 million beings from 7 different species. They are requesting permission to settle in Sol system. Director Han Jisoo felt a familiar tightness in her chest. Every day brought news of more disasters. Every day brought more desperate aliens seeking help from the humans they had expelled from galactic civilization. The irony was brutal and perfect. Dr. Shin Wook continued his report. The medical crisis is spreading faster than we predicted. Human biotechnology had extended average galactic lifespans by 200 years. As that technology fails, beings who should have died centuries ago are aging rapidly. Entire generations are dying within months. How bad is it? Conservative estimates suggest 15 billion deaths in the next year. That is just from medical system failures. It does not include deaths from infrastructure collapse, food shortages, or the conflicts that are starting to break out. Commander Onabi added her own grim news. The Zephyrian Empire and Canthari Republic have officially declared war. They blame each other for the economic collapse that followed the breakdown of human-mediated trade agreements. The Andromedan Confederation has split into 12 separate factions, each claiming to be the legitimate government. Director Han Jisoo walked to the great window that looked out toward the galaxy. From here, she could see the distant stars where trillions of beings were struggling to survive without human help. She felt no satisfaction in their suffering, only a deep sadness at the waste of it all. A soft chime indicated an incoming priority. Message. Dr. Shin Wook checked his communicator and looked surprised. It is from Ambassador Quillnox. He is requesting permission to visit Earth. Ambassador Quillnox had been one of the few alien leaders to oppose humanity's expulsion from the Galactic Council. His insect-like species valued logic over politics. This had made them natural allies of humanity. Grant his request, Director Han Jisoo said. It will be interesting to hear his perspective on current events. 3 days later, Ambassador Quillnox arrived at Earth aboard a small diplomatic vessel. He looked older than Director Han Jisoo remembered. His usually precise movements seemed tired. His multifaceted eyes, normally bright with intelligence, were dim with exhaustion. They met in the director's office overlooking the blue curve of Earth. Ambassador Quillnox declined the offered chair and stood in the formal manner of his people. Director Han Jisoo, I come bearing a message from the surviving members of what was once the Galactic Council. How many members are still functioning? 47 governments remain stable enough to maintain representatives. The rest have either collapsed entirely or are too busy with internal crises to participate in galactic affairs. Director Han Jisoo gestured for him to continue. They wish to formally apologize to humanity for the events that led to your departure. They acknowledge that the charges against your species were unjust. They request that humanity consider returning to participate in galactic governance. And what do they offer in return for our participation? Ambassador Quillnox was quiet for a long moment. Everything. Full voting rights, veto power over all council decisions, formal recognition of human superiority in technological and scientific matters, complete autonomy for all human colonies and territories. Director Han Jisoo almost smiled. 6 months ago, the Galactic Council had tried to strip humanity of all rights and confine them to Sol System. Now they were offering to make humans the rulers of the galaxy. Tell me, Ambassador Quillnox, how does your own world fare? My people are struggling. We specialized in interstellar navigation and trade coordination. We relied heavily on human communication technology and computational systems. Without them, our ability to coordinate trade across multiple star systems has been severely reduced. We face economic hardship and possible societal breakdown within the year. I am sorry to hear that. Your people were good friends to humanity, which is why I must ask. Ambassador Quillnox paused, and Director Han Jisoo realized he was trying to control his emotions. Is there any possibility that humanity might provide assistance to species that supported you in the Council? Not a return to galactic governance, but perhaps limited technological aid? Director Han Jisoo had been expecting this question. She had also been dreading it. Ambassador, I understand your position. Your people showed courage in supporting humanity when it was not popular to do so. But I must ask you to consider the situation from our perspective. She gestured toward the window and the stars beyond. For 2 centuries, humanity worked to build a peaceful and prosperous galactic civilization. We shared our knowledge freely. We solved problems that other species could not solve. We prevented wars, cured diseases, and fed hungry populations. Yes, this is all true. And in return, we were accused of being too aggressive, too unpredictable, too dangerous. We were told that helping enslaved populations was interference. We were told that improving trade agreements was disruptive. We were told that curing diseases and feeding people was somehow a threat to galactic stability. Ambassador Quillnox listened in silence. The Galactic Council voted 834-3 to expel humanity from galactic civilization. They wanted us gone. Now we are gone. And now they discover that they cannot maintain their civilization without us. Director Han Jisoo turned from the window to face Ambassador Quillnox directly. You ask if we will provide limited technological aid. But we tried that for 200 years. Every time we helped someone solve a problem, we were accused of creating new problems. Every improvement we made was seen as a threat. Every solution we offered was viewed with suspicion. But surely you understand that not all species supported these attitudes. 3 species opposed our expulsion. 3 out of 847. Even if we wanted to help only our friends, how do we do that without helping their enemies? How do we provide technology to your people without that technology eventually reaching the species that tried to cage us? Ambassador Quillnox had no answer for this. Dr. Shin Wook joined them in the office carrying his latest report. The numbers were worse than ever. Galactic population has declined by 12% in the last 6 months. Industrial production is down 78%. Interstellar trade has nearly ceased. Communication between distant sectors is sporadic at best. Conservative projections suggest that galactic civilization will regress to pre-spaceflight levels within 2 years. Ambassador Quillnox received this news in stunned silence. There is something else, Dr. Shin Wook continued. Our scientists have discovered that the collapse is not just technological. Human presence in the galaxy appears to have created what we are calling an innovation field. What does that mean? Director Han Jisoo asked. Human creativity and problem-solving ability seems to have a quantum effect on local space-time. In areas where humans lived and worked, the rate of innovation and adaptation in other species was significantly higher than baseline. President Kim Yuna stood in the Oval Office of the United Earth Federation and read reports that would have seemed like fantasy a year ago. Humanity had not just survived their divorce from galactic civilization, they had exploded into a golden age of innovation and exploration. Dr. Lee Sori entered the office carrying a datapad filled with breakthrough announcements. As head of post-galactic human development, she tracked the amazing progress humanity had made since returning to Sol system. "The numbers are extraordinary, Doctor," Lee Sori said, settling into a chair across from the president's desk. "Without the restrictions and bureaucracy of the Galactic Council, human innovation has increased by 340%. We have achieved more technological advancement in the last year than in the previous 50 years combined." President Kim Yuna reviewed the highlights. Faster-than-light travel that did not require jump gates, self-repairing nanotechnology that could build entire cities in weeks, fusion reactors so efficient they made stars look wasteful, medical technology that could extend human lifespans to over 500 years. "It is remarkable what we can accomplish when we are not spending half our time explaining to aliens why helping people is not a crime," President Kim Yuna said. General Park Ji-ho joined them for the daily security briefing. As Supreme Commander of Human Defense Forces, he monitored the increasingly desperate attempts by alien fleets to enter Sol system. "We turned away 14 fleets yesterday," General Park Ji-ho reported. "The largest was a combined armada of 200 ships from 7 different species. They claimed to be a diplomatic mission, but their weapons were powered and their shield generators were active." "What did you tell them?" "The same thing we tell everyone. Sol system is closed to alien traffic. All communication should go through official Earth diplomatic channels. Any attempt to force entry will be considered an act of war." President Kim Yuna nodded. The policy was simple and clear. Humanity was done with galactic politics. They would defend their space, but they would not attack alien territories. They would accept diplomatic communication, but they would not provide aid or technology to species that had voted to cage them. Dr. Lee Sori showed the president her latest analysis of galactic conditions. The news was grim beyond imagination. Galactic civilization has essentially ceased to exist as a coherent entity. Communication networks have failed across 80% of previously inhabited space. Industrial production has collapsed to pre-spaceflight levels on most worlds. The death toll now exceeds 50 billion beings. How many governments are still functional? 12. Down from the original 847 members of the Galactic Council. Most worlds have regressed to subsistence-level technology. Some have lost the ability to maintain basic electrical power. President Kim Yuna felt a familiar mixture of sadness and frustration. This disaster could have been avoided so easily. All the aliens had to do was treat humanity as equals instead of threats. Instead, they had chosen to drive away the only species capable of maintaining their civilization. Now they were paying the price. Captain Nam-hoon contacted them from the exploration vessel New Horizon. He had just returned from the first human expedition beyond the former galactic borders. What he found there was sobering evidence of how complete the collapse had become. "Madam President, I am transmitting visual data from the Kepler sector. You need to see this." The main screen in the Oval Office activated, showing images from Captain Nam-hoon's mission. Where once there had been thriving star systems with billions of inhabitants, there was now only debris and silence. The Kepler system housed 12 billion beings last year, Captain Nam-hoon reported. The entire system was dependent on human-designed infrastructure for power, communication, and life support. When we left, they had 6 months of automated operation before systems would require maintenance. What did you find? Ghost ships drifting in space. Dead space stations with no power or life support. Planetary settlements that have gone dark. I estimate 99% population loss across the entire sector. President Kim Yuna stared at the images of floating cities that had once housed millions of beings. Now they were tombs, spinning silently through space. Dr. Lee Sori added more disturbing news. Similar reports are coming in from all of our long-range scout missions. The collapse was not gradual. Once human-maintained systems reached critical failure points, entire civilizations simply stopped functioning. Most alien species lack the technical knowledge to repair or replace the infrastructure they depended on. General Park Ji-ho received an urgent communication from Sol System Perimeter Defense. "Madam President, we have a situation developing at the outer system boundary. A massive refugee fleet is approaching. Preliminary scans indicate over 3,000 ships carrying approximately 8 million beings." "What species?" "Mixed fleet. At least 15 different species are represented. They appear to be the survivors of multiple civilizational collapses." President Kim Yoon felt the weight of decisions settling on her shoulders. Every day brought more refugee fleets carrying the remnants of species that had once ruled star-spanning empires. Every day the choice became harder. The refugee fleet was led by a being calling herself Thisara. She had once been a senior administrator in the Andromedan Confederation. Now she led the scattered survivors of 17 different species, whose worlds had gone dark when human-maintained infrastructure failed. President Kim Yoon agreed to meet with Thisara via secure communication link. The alien leader appeared on the main screen looking exhausted and desperate. Her species had blue skin and silver hair, but her appearance was haggard from months of refugee flight. President Kim Yoon, I come not with demands or threats, but with a simple request. My people are dying, our ships are failing, our children are sick. Earth is the only place in the galaxy where the technology still exists to save them. What are you asking for? Sanctuary. A place where our people can live without fear of starvation or system failure. We offer our knowledge, our labor, our loyalty. We ask only for the chance to survive. President Kim Yoon studied the alien leader. Thisara had not been among those who voted to expel humanity from the Galactic Council. Her species had actually abstained from the vote, which was better than most. And if we refuse? Then we die. Not today, not tomorrow, but soon. Our ships can sustain life for perhaps another month. After that. Thisara gestured helplessly. Dr. Lee Sori provided context for the president. Thisara's fleet represents the largest concentration of refugees we have encountered. They have maintained better organization and technology than most survivor groups. If we are going to help anyone, they would be the logical choice. General Park Jae-ho was less optimistic. Madam President, accepting refugees sets a precedent. We could have every surviving population in the galaxy heading for Earth. Our resources are not unlimited. President Kim Yoon understood both perspectives. Humanity had the technology and resources to help the refugees. They also had good reasons to refuse. The debate within human society had been raging for months. Some argued that the galaxy had made its choice and must live with the consequences. Others contended that humanity's moral obligations extended beyond politics. But there was another factor that Dr. Lee Sori had recently discovered. Something that changed everything. Madam President, I need to share some new research with you. Our scientists have been studying the quantum effects of human presence on galactic civilization. We have discovered something remarkable. Dr. Lee Sori activated a holographic display showing the galaxy before and after humanity's departure. The differences were stunning. Human presence in the galaxy created what we call an innovation field. Our natural creativity and problem-solving ability had a measurable quantum effect on local space-time. In regions where humans lived and worked, other species showed enhanced innovative thinking and adaptive capability. You mentioned this before. Yes, but we have now discovered something else. The effect is not just technological. Human presence seems to stabilize complex social and economic systems. We were not just maintaining galactic civilization with our technology. We were maintaining it with our fundamental nature as problem solvers and innovators. President Kim Yoon began to understand. You are saying that the collapse was inevitable. Once we left, regardless of the technology we took with us. Exactly. Even if we had left all our technology behind, galactic civilization would have collapsed anyway. Without the innovation field generated by human presence, complex interstellar society cannot maintain itself long-term. This revelation changed everything. The galaxy had not just lost humanity's technology. They had lost the invisible foundation that made their civilization possible. General Park Jae-ho raised the obvious question. If human presence is necessary for maintaining complex civilization, what does that mean for the refugees? Can we help them without returning to the galaxy, Dr. Lee Sori had been studying this question. Theoretically, we could establish human-administered sanctuary zones, small areas where refugees could live under the protection of human-generated innovation fields, but it would require permanent human presence and administration. President Kim Yoon considered the implications. Humanity could save some of the refugees, but only by taking responsibility for governing them.